The annual Henderson family Christmas gathering at the Aspen Lodge was their crowning social event. My sister Madeline had orchestrated every detail from the hand-calligraphed invitations to the imported decorations. I smoothed my simple black sweater, watching the scene unfold through the lodge's vast windows. My family hadn't spotted me yet, standing in the shadows of the grand lobby. "Did you hear from Emily?" Aunt Sarah asked Mom, who was arranging crystal champagne flutes. "Oh," Mom waved dismissively, "she won't be joining us. All the luxury hotels are fully booked." She smiled, clearly pleased. "We told her months ago to reserve rooms, but she was too busy with her, what does she call it? Hospitality consulting." If they only knew that hospitality consulting meant building elite hotels, the world's most exclusive luxury chain. 5 years of careful acquisition and development, all under shell companies to hide my identity as owner and CEO. "Poor Emily," Madeline simpered, adjusting her designer scarf. "Still playing hotelier while we enjoy the best suite at Aspen Lodge." My phone buzzed. A message from my COO. "Acquisition of Aspen Lodge complete. Transfer of ownership finalizes at midnight." She could have been part of this, Dad sighed, sipping his scotch. If she'd just joined the family real estate business instead of chasing pipe dreams. I checked my watch. In exactly 3 minutes, Elite Hotels would announce its acquisition of the lodge, along with 20 other premium properties worldwide. "At least she's employed," Mom sniffed. "Though managing budget hotels is hardly a career. All luxury hotels are fully booked," Madeline gloated again, clearly enjoying my supposed exclusion. "She'll probably spend Christmas at one of her little motels." I stepped forward finally, heels clicking on marble. "Actually, I have accommodations arranged." "Emily." Mom startled. "How did you get in?" "I own the building," I replied calmly, just as my phone buzzed with the official announcement. "Breaking news. Elite Hotels acquires luxury portfolio including Aspen Lodge. CEO Emily Henderson expands empire to 100 properties worldwide." Dad's face went pale. Madeline's champagne glass slipped from her fingers. "Margaret," I spoke into my phone, "please cancel the Henderson family's presidential suite access. Effective immediately." "That's impossible," Mom sputtered. "This is the most exclusive resort in Aspen. You can't possibly." "Check the ownership transfer," I suggested mildly. As of midnight, Elite Hotels owns not just this property, but every luxury hotel in Aspen. "Elite Hotels?" Dad whispered. "The chain that's revolutionizing luxury hospitality?" "My little hospitality consulting project," I nodded. "Though I suppose managing budget hotels isn't as impressive as real estate development." Madeline frantically checked her phone, reading the breaking news. $8 billion. Acquisition of premium properties. Industry-leading service protocols. "Your budget hotels," Mom said faintly. "They were just a cover." "A very profitable cover," I confirmed. "While you were mocking my career choice, I was building the most successful luxury hotel chain in the world." The lobby screens flickered with the news, showing Elite Hotels properties across the globe, each one more luxurious than the last. My photo appeared alongside headlines announcing the historic acquisition. "The Christmas reservations," Dad started, realizing the implications, "are now under Elite Hotels management," I finished. "And unfortunately, we have a strict policy against guests who treat hospitality workers as beneath them." My phone rang, the mayor of Aspen, probably calling about the town's largest property transfer in history. I let it go to voicemail. "Miss Henderson?" My assistant approached. "The international press is waiting for your statement about the acquisition." "The suite," Madeline said desperately. "All our Christmas plans should have included basic respect for people in hospitality," I replied. "Funny how that works out." Through the lobby windows I could see news vans arriving. The story of Elite Hotels' expansion was breaking worldwide. "But where will we stay?" Mom asked, her voice small. "Everything else is booked. There's a lovely budget motel on the outskirts of town," I smiled slightly. "Since that's more what did you call it? My level?" Dad stepped forward, his real estate developer confidence shattered. "Princess, we didn't know." "That was the point," I cut him off. I learned early not to share success with people who'd already decided I was a failure. My phone buzzed again. Stock prices soaring as markets reacted to Elite's expansion. The little hotelier had just become one of the most powerful figures in luxury hospitality. Emily, Mom tried again. It's Christmas. Yes, I agreed. A perfect time to learn about humility and the value of every person in the hospitality industry. As I turned to leave, Madeline called out desperately, "We're family." I paused at the grand entrance. Family? That didn't matter when you thought I was beneath you. Now if you'll excuse me, I have an empire to run. The next morning I sat in my private office at the Aspen Lodge, watching multiple screens display Elite Hotel's triumphant expansion. Every major news network covered the story, luxury hospitality's new queen, and how Emily Henderson built an $8 billion hotel empire in secret. The transition is complete, Ms. Henderson, my CEO announced. All properties now operating under Elite protocols. And, she smiled slightly, your family spent the night at the Mountain View Motel. I glanced at the security feed showing my family trudging through snow from the budget motel, the only accommodation available during peak season. Madeline's designer luggage looked particularly out of place in the modest surroundings. There in the lobby, my assistant informed me through the intercom. Your sister appears to be distressed. Send them up, I said, turning to face the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the snow-covered mountains. Let them see what playing hotelier really means. They entered like chastened children, their usual confidence stripped away. The office, all sleek luxury and commanding views, seemed to diminish them further. The motel, Madeline began, her voice hoarse. It was beneath you, I suggested. Like hospitality work. Emily, Mom stepped forward, clutching her designer handbag. The news is saying Elite Hotels is worth $8 billion, I confirmed. Though with today's stock jump, probably closer to 10. Dad moved to speak, but froze as he saw the wall of awards behind my desk. Hotelier of the Year, Most Innovative Luxury Brand, Hospitality Visionary. Your hotels, he said quietly. They're not just luxury properties, are they? They're revolutionizing the entire industry. Among other things, I nodded. Elite service protocols are being studied at top business schools. Though I suppose that's not as impressive as local real estate development. My phone buzzed continuously, congratulations from world leaders, investment offers, acquisition proposals. The hospitality world had woken up to find a new queen. The Christmas gala, Madeline said suddenly. All the society people coming. We'll need to find other accommodations, I finished. Elite Hotels has rather strict standards about guest behavior. Mockery of service staff is an automatic blacklist offense. Mom sank into a guest chair. But the planning committee, my charity board, they're all coming to Aspen. They were coming to my hotel, I corrected. And now they're not welcome. Actions have consequences. Through the windows, more guests arrived in luxury vehicles, Elite's signature service making even jaded travelers feel like royalty. Ms. Henderson? My assistant interrupted. The Saudi royal family is requesting your personal attention for their New Year's booking. And the White House called about the presidential suite. Tell them I'll handle it personally, I replied. Unlike some people, I believe no guest is beneath my attention. Dad stepped forward, desperation in his voice. Princess, we were wrong. Save it, I held up my hand. I'm about to announce Elite's next expansion. 10 more properties, including that resort in Maui you tried to buy last year. Madeline's head snapped up. The one that wouldn't sell to us. Because I already owned it, I smiled slightly. Through one of my budget hotel companies. The screens showed Elite stock continuing to soar as markets digested our expansion news. The little hotelier had become hospitality's biggest success story. The service standards, Mom said suddenly. The way your staff treats every guest like royalty. Because they are professionals who deserve respect, I emphasized. Every housekeeper, every valet, every front desk clerk. The people you thought were beneath you? They're the heart of my success. My phone rang, another royal family seeking accommodations. Elite had become the only acceptable choice for the world's most discerning travelers. What do you want? Madeline asked quietly. Name your price to restore our reservations. I laughed, the sound echoing off marble walls. I'm worth $10 billion. There is no price. Then why? She pressed. Revenge. Education, I corrected. About respect, dignity, and the value of every person in hospitality. Consider this your crash course. The lobby screens showed more guests arriving, each receiving Elite's legendary welcome. Meanwhile, my family stood in borrowed clothes, their designer luggage stored in a budget motel. You should go, I said finally. I have an empire to run. The Mountain View Motel has a lovely continental breakfast, I hear. Quite a change from your usual caviar and champagne. As security prepared to escort them out, I called after them. Oh, and Madeline? The next time you mock someone in hospitality, remember, they might just own the building. 3 months later, I stood in Elite Hotel's flagship New York property, watching the sunset paint golden streaks across Manhattan's skyline. Forbes magazine's latest cover sat on my desk. The Hospitality Revolution. How Emily Henderson built a $15 billion empire on respect. The first quarter results, Ms. Henderson, my CFO announced, displaying holographic projections. Revenue up 200% since the expansion. Our service satisfaction scores are unprecedented. Through the windows I could see guests arriving, world leaders, celebrities, royalty, all drawn by Elite's reputation for unparalleled service and respect. Miss Henderson? My assistant's voice came through. Your family is here. They've completed the training program. I checked the security feed. They looked different now, humbled. Madeline wore a simple black suit instead of her designer labels. After experiencing life on the other side of hospitality, they'd all changed. The training program had been my condition for even considering their return to Elite properties. 30 days working every position in a hotel. Housekeeping, front desk, kitchen staff, valet parking. Send them up, I said, turning to face the city lights. Let's see what they learned. They entered quietly, nothing like their former entitled selves. Mom's perfectly manicured hands showed signs of honest work. Dad's designer shoes were replaced with comfortable service industry standard. The housekeeper on the 4th floor, Madeline spoke first, her voice soft. Maria. She has 3 children and works 2 jobs. I used to snap my fingers at people like her. And now I understand why your first action as CEO was to double service staff salaries and provide full benefits. I nodded, remembering the industry's shock when Elite Hotels announced its revolutionary employee policies. The training, Dad said quietly. It was enlightening. Amazing what happens when you walk in someone else's shoes, I replied. Or in this case, someone else's uniform. Mom stepped forward, tears in her eyes. The guests I checked in, the way some of them looked at me like I was nothing. Like you used to look at hotel staff? I suggested mildly. They flinched collectively. The hospitality industry, I continued, moving to the window, isn't about luxury suites or champagne service. It's about human dignity. Every guest, every employee, every interaction matters. My phone buzzed with another update. Elite's employee satisfaction scores had set new industry records. Turnover was near zero, unheard of in hospitality. Your service protocols, Madeline said. They're not just about luxury, are they? They're about respect. Respect goes both ways, I confirmed. Elite Hotel succeeds because we value everyone, from the CEO to the newest trainee. We understand now, Dad whispered. I turned to face them fully. Do you? Understanding isn't just about walking in someone's shoes for a month. It's about permanent change. The foundation you're starting, Mom ventured, the one for hospitality education, will provide full scholarships for service industry workers and their children, I nodded. Because everyone deserves a chance to rise. I want to help, Madeline said suddenly. Not in management or ownership, but really help. Maybe guest relations? Starting at the bottom. I studied her carefully. The entitled socialite was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned valuable lessons. Entry-level position, I said finally. No special treatment. You'll work every holiday including Christmas. Still interested? Yes, she said firmly. I need to make amends. Not just to you but to every service worker I ever disrespected. And us? Mom asked softly. The employee cafeteria serves Sunday brunch, I replied. Join me there. Not in the executive dining room. We eat where our staff eats. They nodded, understanding the ongoing lesson. But first, I added, there's someone you should meet. I led them to the lobby where an elderly housekeeper worked. Someone who'd been with me since my first hotel. This is Rosa, I introduced them. When every bank rejected my business plan, she invested her life savings in my first property. She believed in respect-based hospitality before it was profitable. Rosa smiled warmly. Miss Henderson showed me that good business and good hearts can go together. My family watched in silence as guests greeted Rosa by name, many stopping to chat with the woman they'd come to know and respect. I have to go, I gathered my materials. The World Economic Forum wants to discuss our employment model. Rosa, keep showing them what true hospitality looks like. As I reached the door, Madeline called out, Emily? Thank you. Not just for the lesson but for the chance to be better. I paused, looking back at my family, at Rosa, at the empire we'd built on a foundation of respect.
The ballroom shimmered under chandeliers, 1,000 tiny lights catching on crystal glasses and gold-rimmed plates. My father, Frank Morgan, stood at the center, a man finally laying down the heavy mantle of leadership after 40 years at Morgan Industries. I sat at a corner table, smiling politely, nursing a glass of untouched champagne. Rachel, my sister, was the picture of confidence, circling the room in a deep blue dress, her laughter crisp and calculated. The MC tapped the microphone. Now, a few words from Frank's beloved daughter, Rachel Morgan. Applause. Cameras flashing. Rachel stepped up, her smile wide, her posture perfect. She launched into memories of growing up around the company, of dreaming big, of building something that would last. People nodded, laughed. Then she shifted. And of course, she said, tilting her head toward me with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. Claire always had her own special pursuits. Not all of us were made for boardrooms. Some of us are better suited to more creative passions. The room tittered. I felt the air tighten around me. Rachel's voice was light, playful, but the barb was sharp. She was mocking the scholarship fund I'd created in Mom's memory, the one I'd poured my savings, my evenings, and my heart into. Dad chuckled. A shallow, awkward sound. I caught the quick glance he threw toward Rachel. Was that discomfort? Fear? Before I could process it, my gaze caught Mr. Langford across the room, Dad's longest-standing business partner. His smile had flattened. His eyes were locked on Rachel with something colder than amusement. I straightened in my seat. Rachel continued, painting herself as the natural heir, the dutiful daughter who had stayed close to the family legacy. Her words flowed like honey, but I heard the poison beneath. As applause swelled again, my hands stayed folded neatly in my lap. My face didn't betray anything. Years ago, I would have flushed with humiliation. Tonight, I simply watched, because something had shifted inside me, something I hadn't even known was still alive. But why now? Why would Rachel risk showing her teeth in public, tonight, of all nights? And why did Dad's smile feel like a shield, not a celebration? There was a time I believed Rachel's rise was natural, that she simply worked harder, cared more, stayed closer to Dad when I drifted toward different dreams. When I left for college, across the country, chasing a dual major in business and fine arts, Rachel stayed. She sat in on board meetings as an intern. She shadowed Dad at shareholder events. I thought it was sweet, admirable even. I never saw the cracks forming. At Thanksgiving dinners, she'd joke about how Claire always had the creative spirit while she held down the fort. I'd laugh along, not realizing I was already being written out of the family story. When Dad started talking about future leadership, I still wasn't worried. He encouraged both of us. He said there was room for different kinds of brilliance. I trusted him. But what I didn't know, what I only discovered much later, was that his support came with silent conditions, unspoken expectations. Be practical. Be present. Follow the blueprint. Rachel understood those rules. She played them like a symphony. I didn't even know the music was playing. Years later, over coffee with an old family friend, I heard the story I wasn't meant to know. Dad had once put my name forward for an executive development program, an elite fast track for future CEOs. Rachel had found out. She'd accidentally mentioned to Dad's advisors how unreliable I could be, how I was easily distracted, how I was passionate but not built for corporate pressure. It wasn't malicious, she'd claimed. She was protecting me from a path that would have crushed my spirit. Dad, facing pressure from the board and his own doubts, withdrew my name quietly. No discussion. No confrontation. By the time I graduated, the company had already started shaping itself around Rachel. There had never been a formal erasure. No shouting matches, no public betrayals, just a slow, quiet pruning of possibility. I thought I had chosen a different life. But the truth was harsher. The door had been closing behind me for years, and I hadn't even heard it latch. What else had been decided about my life without me even realizing? It started with an envelope, no return address, no note. Just my name, scrawled across the front in a hand I didn't recognize. Inside, a printed email thread, clipped together. Subject line, succession planning, risk mitigation. My stomach twisted. The thread was between Dad's legal advisor, Harold Price, and Rachel. Discussions about how to protect the brand from potential instability, how certain family members might lack the long-term vision needed for sustainable leadership. They never mentioned me by name. They didn't have to. There was a line from Rachel that stuck out like a splinter. Clare's initiatives, while heartfelt, reflect an emotional volatility that could endanger Morgan Industries' future positioning. Volatility. A word that slipped into boardrooms like poison slipped into wine. I sat there for a long time, the papers trembling slightly in my hands. How long had Rachel been crafting this narrative? Had Dad seen these emails? Had he agreed? Or had she slowly fed him these doubts, one conversation at a time, until he barely remembered why he ever believed in me? I needed answers. I started digging, quietly, pulling old board reports, asking careful, offhand questions to people who still remembered. When Mom was alive, when the company felt different, and then Maggie Jensen found me. Maggie, who had been Rachel's assistant back in those critical years. Maggie, who once adored Rachel, and who now looked at me like someone trying to make amends. We met at a small cafe 2 towns over. She stirred her coffee without drinking. I stayed quiet too long, she said. I thought it was just business, just ambition. I didn't realize how far she'd go. She slipped me a second folder. Personnel memos, internal notes, small things, but damning when pieced together. Rachel hadn't just undermined my opportunities. She'd actively steered my reputation within the company toward irrelevance, and someone, maybe Maggie, maybe someone higher up, wanted me to see it now. But why? Why now, after all these years? And what did they expect me to do with the truth? It would have been easier to believe Rachel was simply greedy, easier to see her as the villain, plotting and calculating behind closed doors. But the truth, once I began piecing it together, was far messier. Rachel had always lived with a shadow over her shoulder, mine. When we were kids, she worked twice as hard for half the praise. No matter how many trophies she brought home, it was my art show, my debate medal, my scholarship essay Dad framed in his office. I hadn't seen it then. I hadn't noticed how her smiles sometimes strained at the corners, how she clutched her report, cards a little tighter, waiting for validation that never quite came. And when Mom died, something inside Rachel hardened. Dad, lost in his own grief, leaned heavily on the child who stayed, the reliable one. Maybe she started believing the only way to earn her place was to protect Dad's legacy at any cost. Maybe she thought cutting me out wasn't cruelty, it was survival. I also learned that Derek, her husband, had been pressuring her quietly, but relentlessly. He had aspirations far beyond what Rachel could deliver alone. He needed her cemented as the uncontested heir, or risk losing status, power, wealth. Rachel wasn't just battling old insecurities. She was battling time. Battling expectations she had once begged for, and now couldn't control. I wanted to hate her. Part of me did. But another part, the part Mom raised, understood something colder. Rachel had spent her life chasing validation that would never come from taking the easy way. And somewhere along the way, she convinced herself that erasing me was the only way to finally be enough. The question that kept me awake at night was simple. If Rachel thought she was saving herself, what was I willing to do to save what was left of me? You can't fight a machine by throwing stones. You dismantle it gear by gear in silence, while it hums unaware. That's how I approached it. The day after Maggie slid that second folder across the cafe table, I drove 3 hours to visit Mr. Langford, the man whose glance of disapproval at the party had stayed lodged in my mind. We sat in his study, surrounded by dusty books and portraits of people who had shaped Morgan Industries long before Rachel or I had even been born. I always thought you had more steel than they gave you credit for, Langford said, sipping his bourbon. And now? He smiled thinly. Now I'm willing to place a bet. Langford still held a block of voting shares, small individually, but powerful when combined with a few other forgotten allies. Old managers Rachel had alienated, quiet shareholders who disliked the direction she was steering the company. Piece by piece, I began gathering them, not with grand promises, just calm conversations, a vision for a company rooted in legacy, but also growth, innovation, meaning. It wasn't easy. At first, some recoiled. They feared Rachel's influence, her husband's reach. A few deals nearly collapsed when anonymous pressure started hitting certain board members, offers to buy them out, thinly veiled threats about future opportunities lost. For a moment, it felt like I was too late, that Rachel's roots ran too deep. That's when Thomas Reed stepped forward. Thomas, Dad's former CFO, quietly pushed out 2 years ago under the guise of early retirement. He had a grudge, certainly, but he also had something better: access. Through Thomas, I secured critical insider knowledge, enough to block Rachel's future mergers and maneuver through proxy votes. But aligning with Thomas wasn't without risk. He was shrewd. He wanted guarantees. His loyalty, I realized quickly, would only last as long as it served his interests. Still, the pieces clicked into place, quietly, relentlessly, inevitably. All that remained was one final move, a move that would either secure everything or expose me completely. And standing at the edge of that decision, I found myself wondering how many secrets were buried under Morgan Industries' polished floors. And when the walls finally cracked, who else would come falling through? The night of Dad's official farewell gala, Rachel glided through the grand hall like she owned it. Maybe, in her mind, she already did. Her speech was a masterpiece, on the surface. She spoke of tradition, of sacrifice, of building for the future. She painted herself as the natural continuation of everything Dad had started. People clapped in the right places, smiled when prompted. But under the glossy applause, there were fractures. Rachel made a misstep, small, almost forgettable. She referenced a charitable initiative she helped launch years ago. Only, that initiative had been spearheaded by Dad himself, a fact well known to most in the room. A few heads tilted. A few murmurs stirred. Dad's expression didn't change immediately, but I caught it. A brief crease between his brows, a subtle shift in his jaw. He wasn't entirely buying it anymore. And then, just before the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new office wing, something else happened. The projector screen behind the stage flickered, briefly showing an old company blueprint. And at the bottom, in clear bold font, a name: Clare Morgan, project lead. A glitch, someone whispered. A technical error. Rachel laughed it off, waving her hand as if brushing away a harmless fly. The crowd chuckled uncertainly, but the moment hung there, awkward, heavy, unresolved. I stayed near the back, hands folded, heart steady. Rachel didn't realize it yet, but her stage was cracking, and the spotlight she so desperately clung to was about to shift. The scissors gleamed under the stage lights, nestled on a velvet cushion. Rachel lifted them, beaming at the crowd, poised to cut the ceremonial ribbon stretched across the entrance to the new office wing. That's when the board chair, Mr. Walters, cleared his throat into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice steady, almost casual. "Before we proceed, there's been a slight update regarding leadership acknowledgements." Rachel froze mid-step, the scissors trembling slightly in her hand. I stepped forward from the back of the room, not hurried, not dramatic, just a quiet, inevitable movement, like the turning of a tide. The crowd shifted, heads turned, cameras clicked. A murmur rippled through the guests, not loud but unmistakable. Mr. Walters extended a hand toward me. "Clare Morgan," he announced, "acting executive chair of Morgan Industries effective immediately, per board vote." Rachel blinked rapidly, confusion flashing across her face before she masked it with a brittle laugh. "Of course," she said, voice bright and tight. "We're a family company. It's a family celebration." She tried to turn it into a joke, a warm gesture, motioning for me to come share the ribbon. But before I could answer, another voice cut through the tension. Mr. Langford, old, sharp, steady, stepped forward from the crowd. "This isn't a family courtesy, Rachel," he said calmly. "This is business." Rachel's hand tightened on the scissors. For a heartbeat, I thought she might actually fight it, but the cameras were rolling. The guests were watching, and so, slowly, stiffly, Rachel lowered the scissors back onto the velvet pillow. I walked forward, past her, without a word. The ribbon, fluttering slightly in the air conditioning, waited for the right hands to sever it, and for the first time that night, Rachel had no script left to hide behind. Mr. Walters adjusted the microphone, his voice crisp against the stunned silence. "Effective today," he said, "Morgan Industries will undergo a structural transition to align with long-term sustainability and ethical stewardship. No accusations, no public humiliation, just enough for those who understood to hear the weight behind his words." Dad shifted in his seat, his hands clasped tightly together. His gaze flickered between Rachel and me, something raw passing through his eyes. Not confusion this time, guilt. Rachel stepped forward, forcing a brittle smile. "I'm sure," she began, voice too loud in the hush, "that any changes will honor Dad's vision, our family's legacy." But the room didn't warm to her, it didn't reach back. Instead, from near the side doors, Mr. Langford spoke again, this time softer, almost kind. "Sometimes," he said, "legacy isn't about preserving what was, it's about protecting what could be." A few heads nodded, a few faces, loyal to Dad for decades, turned toward me instead of Rachel. Rachel's hands trembled slightly at her sides. I didn't gloat. I didn't speak. There was no need. Every word Rachel might have thrown, every accusation she might have made, would only clang against the silence already closing around her. Her fall wasn't dramatic. It was quieter than that, a slow withdrawing, like the tide pulling back from a shore no longer hers, and standing there, ribbon still waiting, cameras still pointed, I realized the battle wasn't about winning the spotlight. It was about outlasting the storm. The scissors were cool and solid in my hand. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment, not heavy with anger, but anchored in something quieter. Certainty. The ribbon trembled slightly in the soft draft of the air vents overhead, its crimson sheen catching the light. Without a word, I sliced through it. A clean, final motion. The crowd erupted into polite applause, the kind reserved for moments everyone knows matter more than anyone dares to say aloud. Rachel stood a few steps away, frozen in place. She didn't storm out. She didn't shout accusations. She simply faded, like a photograph left too long in the sun. As guests began to file toward the new office wing, Dad approached me. For a moment, we simply looked at each other, two lives tied together by blood, by grief, by 1,000 silent failures. Then he extended his hand. When I took it, his other hand covered mine, a quiet, lingering squeeze, not seeking forgiveness, not offering explanations, just acknowledgement. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Later, walking through the bright halls of the new building, I paused outside the executive office. A small brass plaque caught my eye, polished, understated. The Margaret Morgan Scholarship Initiative, founded in honor of perseverance, vision, and heart. I smiled. The future I had fought for wasn't built out of vengeance. It wasn't built to erase the past. It was built to carry forward the pieces that mattered, the ones no betrayal could ever take away. Sometimes winning doesn't look like fireworks. Sometimes it's just walking through a door they once tried to close behind you and leaving it open for someone else to follow.
The couch was already made up, a blanket neatly folded, a pillow fluffed and pressed into the corner. No one asked where I wanted to sleep. I stood just inside the doorway, suitcase still in hand, coat still buttoned up to my throat. My name is Nina Cho, 31 years old, and I hadn't stepped foot in this house or spoken to my family in 8 years. But here I was, back in the 2-story beige box I used to call home, standing in the hallway where every photo on the wall featured my brother Dylan front and center. The same hallway where my voice never carried, where my achievements never made it onto the fridge. When my mother opened the door, her eyes flickered like a light bulb, trying to decide whether it should bother turning on. Nina. Her smile stretched but didn't reach her eyes. "You look older." She stepped aside. I entered. The house smelled the same, like lemon polish, overcooked onions, and something faintly stale beneath it all. There was already a buzz of conversation coming from the kitchen. No one turned around when I walked in. A couple of glances. No greetings. And then the couch. My old room, I was told, was now Dylan's home office. Of course it was. "So sorry," my mom said, as if it were a hotel booking error. "We figured you'd be fine here, just like old times. Just like old times." That phrase stuck to me like static, because I remembered the old times. I remembered the birthdays where Dylan got the cake and I got the leftover icing, the Christmas mornings where he opened 5 gifts before I even touched one, the dinners where I did the dishes and he got praised for finishing his plate. I looked at the couch. Same cushions, same sag in the middle. But I wasn't the same girl who used to curl up on it hoping someone would finally ask her what she wanted to be when she grew up. They'd called me back for Christmas, after all this time, after all the silence, and I couldn't help but wonder why now I was 8 the first time I noticed the pattern. Dylan got applause. I got silence. He brought home a B+ on a math test and there were high fives around the dinner table. I won a regional essay contest. No one mentioned it. They forgot to come to the awards ceremony. At 13, I sat in a beige office chair with my knees pulled to my chest, while Dr. Kaminsky, the school therapist, folded her hands and said plainly to my parents, "Nina isn't distant. She's lonely, and she's learning that being invisible keeps her safe." My mom smiled too tightly. "We love both our kids equally." But I watched Dylan play with the hem of his new hoodie, a brand name one he'd asked for just the week before. My winter jacket was from the clearance bin at the Korean market. 2 sizes too big, still smelling faintly of someone else. He was the golden boy. Football team co-captain, senior class vice president, prom king nominee. He got the car at 16, the framed graduation photos, the customized cake. I got a happy birthday text and leftover candles stuck into a grocery store muffin. When I got accepted into a competitive STEM summer program, I told my parents at dinner. My mom didn't even look up from her phone. My dad asked if it was free. Dylan mentioned he needed new cleats, and suddenly they were planning a trip to the sporting goods store. Still, I kept trying. For a while, I believed if I did enough, they'd see me. At 16, I got my first job fixing computers at a dusty electronics repair shop across town. I'd bike there after school, rain or shine, hands blistered from cold handlebars. By junior year, I was building websites for local businesses, sneaking programming books into my room at night like they were contraband. When I got a full scholarship to an out-of-state tech university, I told my parents in the kitchen. My mom paused the microwave and blinked. "What are we supposed to do with your room then?" Dylan got a backyard party when his Stanford acceptance came in the mail. I moved out with 2 duffel bags and no one even asked for my address. For a while, Dylan would still text surface-level things like Happy New Year or Still Alive. It felt less like care, more like obligation. Then he stopped completely. Years later, I found out why. A friend from back home sent me a photo of Dylan giving a speech at a tech networking event. He was describing how he grew up in a hardworking family that always supported him and how his sister went a different path and lost touch. That was how he framed it. I lost touch. Not that I was shut out. Not that I stopped showing up because there was never a place set for me to begin with. I wasn't angry, just hollow. You grow used to being edited out. The silence folds itself around you like insulation. You stop raising your hand. You stop bringing news home. And eventually, you stop coming home at all. But then the call came, my mom's voice thin over the phone. "It's been so long, Nina. We'd love to see you. Come home for Christmas." As if the years between never happened. As if I had always been welcome. I hung up and stared at the couch in my apartment. It had cost me 4 months' rent and 3 weeks of arguing with the delivery service. It had its own dents and scratches. But it was mine. I wondered if I went back, would anything have changed? Or was I still just the girl meant to sleep on the couch? By Christmas Eve, the living room was a full house. My aunts, uncles, cousins, they were all there balancing paper plates and wine glasses, laughing in pockets of noise. I hovered near the hallway, feeling like a guest at someone else's party. No one really made space. They nodded, gave polite hellos. A few asked what I'd been up to. Not in the curious way, in the please don't actually tell me way. Then Dylan walked in. Sharp blazer, loud voice, holding court like always. "Everyone, this is Mia," he announced, wrapping an arm around a petite woman with glossy hair and an Instagram smile. "And," he gestured dramatically to her stomach, "your future niece or nephew applause. Cheers." My mother's eyes welled with happy tears. I stepped forward and said, "Congratulations." Dylan grinned sideways. "Thanks, sis. Still coding in basements somewhere." Some chuckles followed. I smiled faintly. Something like that. They didn't ask more. Later, while they prepped dinner, I wandered into the dining room. The table was set with name cards, gold cursive folded neatly at each place. I looked for mine. It wasn't there. I circled once, twice. Every spot was labeled, every chair accounted for, except the folding chair shoved to the far end of the table near the swinging kitchen door. No name, no cushion, no surprise. I sat. Steam drifted from the oven as my mom called out, "Dinner's ready," people began to file in. Dylan got the seat next to our father. Mia settled between two cousins. My Aunt Nora sat across from me and glanced at the chair. "Oh dear," she said with a nervous laugh. "I didn't know we were using that one." I smiled. Neither did I. The meal went as I expected. Dylan held attention with tales of his startup dreams and how tech disruption was just around the corner. "I just need the capital," he said, like it was a foregone conclusion. People nodded. My mom patted his hand. "We'll figure it out," she said. Then came the gifts. After dinner, someone brought out a glossy pile of boxes and bags. Names were read aloud. Wrapping paper flew. Squeals of thanks echoed. I handed mine out one by one, carefully chosen cashmere for Mom, rare tea blends for Aunt Nora, a signed first edition for Dad. No one asked how I afforded them. No one paused long enough to ask anything. And when it came time for me, my mom gasped, too loud. "Oh, Nina, we forgot laughter." "Dylan, just like when we were kids. Don't cry this time." I didn't. That night back on the couch, I scrolled through social media, curious. I clicked into my cousin Sarah's page, the one I'd once lent money to so she could cover rent during grad school. Her family photo album was titled Christmas at Home. There were 32 pictures. Laughter, candles, Dylan and Mia glowing. I wasn't in a single one, not even the group photo I was standing in when it was taken. They had cropped me out, or maybe they never framed the shot with me in it at all. I stared at the screen, then slowly turned it off. How do you mourn something that never held you in the first place? That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat on the couch in the dark. No TV, no phone. Just the soft hum of the heater and the occasional rattle of wind against the window. The blanket was the same one from my teenage years, faded blue edges frayed. I pulled it over my knees and stared at the ceiling. I didn't cry. Not out of strength. Just nothing left to spill. There's a moment when you stop hoping the story will change, when you stop waiting for someone to say, "I'm sorry we made you feel small," or "You deserved better." It doesn't come. It never does. So you stop asking. I lay down on the couch not because I had to, but because that was the space they gave me, and this time I wasn't going to fight for more. Instead, I reached for my phone and opened my camera. Took a photo of the couch blanket pillow dim yellow light from the hallway and posted it to my private story. No caption, no context, just the same couch, same spot, a different woman. In the morning, I was the first one up. I folded the blanket neatly, set the pillow upright. I poured myself coffee from the half-empty pot no one had touched and stood by the kitchen window as the sun cracked through the clouds. Mia came downstairs rubbing her belly. She glanced at me surprised. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." She nodded but said nothing. I didn't offer more. I went upstairs quietly, gathered my things from the corner of the hallway where I'd stashed my suitcase. No one had bothered to bring it in. I zipped it closed, double-checked the handle, and wheeled it back down the stairs. The house was still asleep. At the bottom, I paused. I looked at the couch one more time. The dent in the middle, the pillow leaning sideways, the blanket still holding the shape of me. I didn't leave a note. I didn't slam the door. I just walked out. Let them wake to silence. Let them wonder. Let them remember that for once I left before they could push me out. I returned that afternoon mostly out of obligation. My mom had sent a group message when I hadn't realized I'd been added back to reminding everyone about Christmas lunch. I stared at it for a full minute before replying with a single word. Sure. When I arrived, Dylan was already there, arms spread wide like I was the one late to a performance. "Look who decided to show," he said. "The coding queen returns." I gave him a nod, took off my coat and set it on the arm of the couch. The same one. Lunch was loud. People passed dishes without looking at who was reaching. The conversation spun around Dylan again. His startup idea had apparently evolved. Now it was an AI-driven social commerce platform. Or maybe a gamified crypto reward system. It changed depending on which relative asked. "We just need to build the MVP," he said confidently, chewing on a forkful of mashed potatoes. "The bones are solid." "How much are you needing to get started?" my dad asked. Dylan leaned back like he'd been waiting for the question. "About 200,000. Could bootstrap it, but if we want to launch right..." I choked slightly on my water. $200,000. There it was. My mother nodded slowly as if considering something noble. "Well, we'll figure something out," she said, casting a glance in my direction. "Family helps family." The room shifted. Not visibly, but I felt it. Eyes turning, heads tilting, a silence that held weight. Dylan looked at me grinning. "Honestly, Nina, with the kind of work you're doing, that's like a rounding error, right?" I set my fork down. "What kind of work are you doing?" "Dear," Aunt Nora chimed in. Still with the little websites, I smiled polite, but tight. "I design enterprise-level cybersecurity infrastructure for Fortune 500 clients. Our last licensing deal brought in enough for me to buy my apartment outright." A few eyebrows raised. A cousin whispered something to her husband. Dylan whistled low. "Damn, big time." I didn't reply. My dad cleared his throat. "That's impressive. You've really done well for yourself." "I have." Another beat. "We just think my mom started that. If anyone can help Dylan right now, it's you." I looked at them. All of them. The people who used to laugh when I stayed in my room too long, who once offered me a dishwasher job as a joke, who forgot to buy me a gift less than 48 hours ago. "You want me to fund his startup?" I said. "After all this..." Dylan raised a hand like I was being dramatic. "Hey, no pressure." "But come on, Nina. This is a chance to be part of something real." I turned to my mom. "Did you ever ask what I needed when I left home? Or when I had to work 2 jobs in college just to keep a roof over my head?" Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. "You gave him everything. You gave me silence." My dad tried to interject. "That was a different time. You had money for his tuition, for his first car, for his wedding. And I got the couch." My voice didn't rise. I didn't need it to. I stood up and picked up my coat. "I'm not investing in anything, and I'm not staying for dessert." Behind me, Dylan scoffed. "You'll regret this." I turned back, looked him in the eye. "No, I won't." And I meant it. I didn't hear from them that night. No angry texts, no missed calls. Just a strange quiet, like the house had finally swallowed itself. I drove back to the city the next morning without saying goodbye. By the time I reached my apartment, the notifications had started. Aunt Nora. Just wanted to say how proud we all are. Your mom says you're doing so well. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Heard about your job, amazing. Family's family, right? Then my mom, don't let one bad conversation ruin everything. We still love you. Still. As if love had ever been the starting point. I ignored them all. But then came the call I wasn't sure I'd been expecting or dreading. It was from Sarah, my cousin. The one person who years ago had slipped me $20 when I was short on groceries. The one who used to text happy birthday even when no one else remembered. The only person who'd ever stood beside me when the room turned cold. I answered. Jesus, Nina, she said, sighing. What happened? I told her. Not all of it. Just enough. There was a long pause on the other end. You know they're spinning it now, right? She said. Your mom's telling everyone you're rich and heartless. That you ambushed Christmas with your ego. I didn't respond. They're saying you refused to help your own brother when he's starting a business to support a family. I waited. Then she said it. I mean, I know they've been unfair, but maybe just let this one go. I don't think anything good comes from keeping it alive. It stung more than I expected. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't wrong. But she wasn't standing with me either, not really. That's the thing I said quietly. I didn't keep it alive. They just never stopped pretending it didn't happen. Sarah was silent for a moment, then said, I guess I just don't want to see you get pushed out again. I swallowed. I'm not getting pushed out. Then after a breath, I walked out. That's different. They didn't stop trying. For the next week, messages trickled in like clockwork. Carefully worded apologies that never used the word sorry. Just phrases like, let's move forward or family goes through rough patches. One voicemail ended with my mother's voice brittle but oddly bright. Maybe next year you can come a few days early. We'll clear out the guest room. Guest room. It was never mine to begin with, I suppose. I didn't reply. I didn't block them either. Just watched the messages pile up untouched. Like unopened gifts you already know you don't want. Sarah texted once more, everyone's still talking. It's getting out of hand. Do you want me to say something I thought about it? And then I wrote back. No. Let them. Because for once, I wasn't interested in setting the record straight. I wasn't trying to correct their story or clean up the mess they made out of my name. Let them talk. Let them twist it. I wasn't coming back anyway. They could rewrite the ending 100 times over, but I already knew where mine stopped. I said it to Sarah first, almost like a whisper, and I didn't know then that it would be the last thing I'd ever need to say to any of them. I was never missing, I told her. I was always there. They just lived easier pretending I wasn't. 3 weeks later, I donated the couch. The one in my apartment, not because I needed the space, but because I no longer wanted to carry the symbol. It wasn't the same couch I slept on back home, but it might as well have been. Same dull gray. Same sag in the middle. Same way it had held me through years of silence. The movers wrapped it in plastic. As they wheeled it out the door, I caught a glimpse of the underside, faint blue ink, where I had once scribbled an idea for a website back in college. A version of me still trapped in survival. I didn't erase it. I didn't say goodbye. I just turned away. Later that night, I sat on the bare floor where it used to be, a glass of wine, quiet music, no weight behind me, no ghost to lean on. My phone buzzed, another number I didn't recognize. I let it ring. Outside the window, the city shimmered unbothered, alive. The next morning, I posted a photo. No people, no words, just the empty corner where the couch used to be. I didn't caption it, but for anyone who knew me, really knew me, it said everything. Not mine, not anymore. If they ever gave you the couch and called it a gift, you don't have to explain. Just leave a dot.